Thanks to Squarespace for supporting Gamebreaker. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create professional websites, blogs, portfolios, and online stores. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com and use offer code GameBreaker5.
Gamebreaker TV.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to this special early in the week edition of Legendary. We've got an interview with the Blizzard peeps. Joining me, of course, is Olivia D. Grace. How are you, Liv?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be chatting with these guys. It's fantastic. It's very exciting.
Very exciting. We got lots to talk about today. Of course, we're going to talk about some 5.3 and some PvP and all that good stuff. But let me introduce our guests for today. Wait for it. Wait for it.
This is video?
Wait for it. Senior PvP designer, World of Warcraft, Brian Holinka. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you, Gary?
Awesome. Great to have you on the show. Greg, always a pleasure. Greg Street, lead systems designer, once again on the show with video this time. It's like a whole new thing.
The modern era. We're in 2010 now.
It's amazing, amazing, amazing. Good to have you guys back. So we're going to talk obviously a lot about 5.3, a lot of PvP talk, but I want to kick it off. I want to talk a little bit about something that's on a lot of players and gamers' minds. The recent earnings call, we found out about some sub drops, loss in subscribers, and I wanted to get your take on that and what you guys think may have attributed to that.
I mean, there's a lot of players out there. It's always hard to know exactly why every individual makes the decisions they do. Our business model for a long time has been that a lot of players come back for our expansions, and we tend to lose them over time. Patches help a little bit with that. But really, we know the big thing that keeps subscribers is new expansions, which is one of the reasons we are making so much of an effort to come out with expansions faster and faster. We've been saying that for a while. We are actually growing the team now to a point where it's starting to look like a reality, and we think if we can get content out quicker, then we will, people will have less of a reason to kind of get bored and wander off.
Is it becoming like an arms race at this point? There's been a lot of talk, a lot of other people out there in the game design world talking about the MMO industry in general terms about, how fast content has to sort of come out for gamers at this point. Has it really increased that much since the years of to 5, 6, 7 years ago?
I certainly feels like it from where I sit. That used to be it used to be in World of Warcraft just leveling was awesome, and people would join the game and all they would do is try to get to level 60 and have fun doing that. And nowadays, we don't want every expansion to bring 50 or 60 new levels. Oh my god. And so people get through the content pretty quickly, and then they're looking for something at the end game. And the end game for vanilla was almost an afterthought. And ever since then, we focused more and more of our resources on the end game just to, give players something to do. Leveling alts is awesome, but I think there comes a point where you've leveled enough alts, whether that magic number for you is 2, 5, 10, 12, 50, whatever. I don't think making more and more alts is going to be enough to keep players entertained going forward.
All right, so let's talk a little about PvP then, and let's talk a little bit more about endgame. Brian, let's throw out to you. What's been, you're the new guy. What's been your overall aims with PvP since you come on board there, and what has been sort of, I guess, your mission, so to speak?
Yeah, I think kind of the tasking I was given by Greg and Tom was, find ways to make PvP feel fresh, find ways to get more people participating. And find ways to answer a lot of the questions that a lot of PvP players have with respect to what am I supposed to be doing. So, just like providing more content and more ways to play in PvE is like a really interesting thing. That's something we want to do in PvP too. So, in this first year that I've been here, a lot of the time has been spent just, understanding how Blizzard works, understanding a lot of the goals Blizzard has, how it operates, how it designs and makes games, and really aligning myself with, the vision that Tom and Greg have for the game and PvP specifically. So, in a lot of ways, I'm just starting to get my groove now and feel pretty comfortable. They have definitely let me kind of come up with some ideas. Some of them worked out so great, like elite gear being high eye level. But I think we're starting to find things that really make a lot of sense. So I'm pretty excited about all the support they've given me, quite honestly. There's every time I go to them with a new idea or something we want to explore for the future, they're, Tom and Greg are super supportive. They want to see PvP get better. They want to see the game grow, and so many members of the team do too.
Absolutely, but it's been really exciting time to be PvPing in WoW right now as well, particularly with all the sort of the bold changes that are making. I think it's needed to be shaken up for quite some time. But are you guys seeing numbers representation increase at the moment?
Well, it's tough to tell because we're in the middle of the season and the big changes haven't really come yet. So I think the thing, what's probably surprising is the thing that will be most profound impact is the Conquest catch-up cap and what it means for alts, or as I'm told, it's called elts. And, so I think when people are, have the opportunity to all of a sudden, it's really funny because I think when 5.3 hits, all of a sudden you get like this Christmas present of 10,000 conquests. It's going to be a little different in 5.4 when that, that cap is growing constantly. But right now, I think people are waiting on bated breath, like with that guy they haven't played at all, so that they can just jump in and try and get, 12,000 conquests in the first week, and it's going to feel so awesome to go from ashy to classy within a week. So I think that's going to be cool, and I think that is actually going to have a very profound effect on PvP participation. Even, I think the gear one is very helpful. I think it's going to have, it's going to improve the experience for that guy who just dings 90, goes into battlegrounds, or that guy who, his friend says, we're trying to put together a rated battleground group, and they're guilty, so like, well, I don't really have any gear. Well, guess what? You do. And I think that is really going to help. A lot of people just say, yeah, sure, I'll give it a try. Then, we'll see what everybody's experiences are and what things we can improve next.
Let's talk about some of the gearing. So we've seen several different approaches to PvP gearing since Mist's launched. Like, do I phrase that?
So Greg joked with me when I proposed the changes, and he said, as long as it changes every patch.
Every single patch, yeah.
Well, let's start here. Do that. We don't want to do that, though.
What was the thinking behind the gearing changes going into patch 5.2? And then what made you change this approach again going into 5.3?
So the goal in 5.2 was we were seeing like how there's always been this concern, oh, heroic raid gear in PvP, and it's such a problem, and it was a problem we were trying to fix. But the thing is, you have so many tiers of PvE content. You have dungeons, scenarios, LFR, normal raids, and heroic raids. And the PvE goals for gear, you have to, like, when you get a new loot drop, it has to feel good. And like 13 eye levels of gear feels good when you get that improvement. But that feels great for PvE, but it doesn't necessarily, across those tiers, that's like 26 eye levels, and it does not feel great for PvP. So you had this kind of issue where we're trying to keep pace with heroic gear just by eye level, and we were struggling to do that. So it was like, okay, let's introduce 3 tiers of PvP gear. So we'll have your honor set, your conquest set, and then this other set that more closely matches the heroic gear. The problem was, we also added upgrades in 5.1, and as soon as we stepped into 5.2, we heard people start complaining. And the big complaints were, there's too big of a difference between people with Tier 2 double upgraded gear and this honor gear. They're at a huge disadvantage, and the game feels terrible to me. And then the other complaint was, I have Tier 2 double upgraded gear, and the new Conquest gear is 2 eye levels higher. Like, this sucks. So that basically said, I kind of was talking to people, and I'm like, I think it's going to be worse in 5.4 because the elite gear, basically what happens next season. We have 3 tiers now. What's the honor gear supposed to be next season? Well, it's supposed to be the conquest gear. And then what about the elite? Like, so is the honor gear supposed to be the elite gear, or what's supposed to go on? Do we totally discount everything those people have done, in a moment of 24 hours during the patch? So, we said, you know what? People want 2 tiers of honor gear, or 2 tiers of PvP gear. That's what they want. That's what makes sense for the game. And so we redevised the system. We still wanted to solve the goal of, like, heroic PvE gear isn't the best in slot gear as much as possible.
Yeah.
And, I think we have a pretty good solution. It's a little hard for players to understand at first. We're going to see how it goes. We've gotten some feedback about some concerns, and we're going to watch them. We're going to maintain, vigilance about the things we've done, and we can always address them. It's a growing game.
Absolutely. The changes seem great from my perspective anyway. I'm very much looking forward to getting some alts and getting them geared up and getting into there with that as well. And yes, alts, guys.
An alt shaman?
Another shaman, yes, exactly. An alt shaman. But, on a serious note, do you worry about changing too much too quickly? Like, for players people who are watching this live stream and the people who read websites and keep up on things, it's fine. They're in touch with it. But for the players who don't do all of that, do you ever worry that it's changing a little bit too much too quickly and it's going to just leave people behind?
Every day.
One of the things we hear from players all the time, I don't know where it ranks in the reasons why people quit, but they tell us the game changed too fast and I couldn't keep up with it. For Cataclysm, for Mist of Pandaria, we heard players say, you know what, I really like the direction you're going. I think all these changes you made were good, but just the fact that they changed it all means I have to relearn my class. I have to relearn my gearing options. I have to relearn how the systems work, and I just don't have the bandwidth for that. Sorry. So it comes at a huge cost making change. We have to make sure that we think the change is worth it and isn't just change for change's sake.
Yeah, we're like, we're trying to solve a problem, so it's like trying to solve that problem and trying to, like, not change too much. I think in this particular, like, the resilience change, I think if you're a PvPer, though, your goals are still the same. Get the best conquest gear this season. There's going to be talk on the forums about, like, I think this PvE set bonus is better, but ultimately, if you're a PvPer and you still go and get the conquest, you're gonna perform at the high level. You're doing the right thing, and I think that's what's important about that.
Talking a little bit more about sort of like communication. It seems like you guys have been really clear that you want PvP gear to be the best gear for PvP, right? But it does seem like a lot of people aren't really getting the message. So what are you guys doing to kind of ensure that PvE gear doesn't just get the upper hand?
Well, I think a lot of it is, like we've all said, we're very present in the internet. We're on Twitter. We're reading Arena Junkies. We're reading MMO Champion, all those other sites. Reading the BattleNet forums, and we're in tune with all that. That is not a large percentage of the players. So I think those people are kind of setting a tone, and everybody's kind of reiterating the same thing and the same concerns, but we all haven't seen it yet and experienced it yet. So I think once we experience it, that's going to be the key. Like I said, we have knobs we can turn if we do see it's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that one of the specific things that people have been concerned about is world PvP, because obviously, as we know, the item level of the PvE gear is only going to be downscaled within PvP-specific instances, such, your arenas, your battlegrounds, your rated battlegrounds. So, are you guys concerned about that, or is it something that you're sort of not too worried about? Is it still going to be the better thing to have PvP gear in open world PvP?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I concern mostly for the things that we push players towards with our reward systems. We reward conquest and honor primarily for the instance content, and that's where the overwhelming majority of the players live. We certainly are concerned for world PvP, but the challenge is that world PvP is very unstructured. It's very difficult to balance. The overwhelming determining factor of who wins a world PvP battle is who brings more swords to the fight. And it's tough to say that other parts of the game should really suffer for something that's very volatile, and that we don't necessarily push players into. it's great when it happens. We love to see world PvP. We love to see that interaction between players. We love to put them next to each other and kind of fights escalate and whatnot. But you're probably in a world PvP battle going to be getting hit by so many people that it's hard to say, like, okay, let's in the armory all 15 of those people and see what gear they were wearing, and then send an angry.
They're going to make a forum post. They're going to tweet Brian on Twitter, etc., etc. I think one. Oh, sorry,
think about the number of times you lost a fight in world PvP. How often was that related to gearing levels? Probably because they waited to kill a mob and were injured before they ganked you, or something like that.
Exactly.
That's fun, and that's part of the whole game.
We want it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the only other one which is sort of a concern that I've been hearing a bit about is the tanking guys in actual instance PvP. Because obviously we've got the PvP gear is not necessarily tailored particularly around tanking classes. And furthermore, there's also obviously been the nerfs recently to tank flag carrier damage. But where are you guys going with this? I mean, I think some PvP tanks are a little concerned.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we see is that tanks in PvP are kind of like, they're super necessary in this one part of PvP. Rated Battleground, flag carriers. They're super important there. Everywhere else, it's great to have a pro warrior guarding a flag, but you can also have some other classes do that as well. So they're not essential, but they're essential right now in rated CTF maps. So we just don't really think that's great. We don't, and the gameplay isn't great, because right now, against two teams that are very good, generally what they do is the flag carriers pick up the flag and go retreat to their bases, and people wait under their graveyards for 4 stacks, and then they push. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't think it should be a mistake for someone else to pick up the flag. And unfortunately, the primary way to do that is that debuff. We basically say, well, everybody takes damage, but we're trying to offset some of the damage reduction that tanking classes have. Now, concern about PvP gear in tanks, it's a very tricky problem. I think it's one where we didn't feel very comfortable that we had the right solution for tanks in PvP and gear. I think in one stance, it would also be pretty rough if you were, let's say, a druid who liked to be resto and guardian, that you all of a sudden have double the conquest requirement that everybody else has, because you need to get both your tank set and your resto set, or your feral set and your guardian set. That's tough, right? So I think we're kind of in a situation where we're going to watch and see what people do with this new debuff, if the meta changes, and then we can kind of attack that gearing situation in 5.4. Because it's kind of where we felt like there was a gameplay problem first. We wanted to solve that problem and still see, is this gear problem really a problem?
How do you see lower levels of PvP gear stacking up against downscaled PvE gear?
It's like the honor and the crafted gear against the downscaled raid gear.
So, I actually got a tweet about that this morning, right? Where somebody was basically like, hey, you've got, I don't think it's fair that the guy who dings 90 and gets crafted gear is worse off than the guy who's been raiding, but I guess didn't buy crafted gear. I mean, I feel like the guy who's raiding, you have to think of the fact that at the very top, World of Warcraft is an RPG, and it's about doing things that get your character gear and make your character better. And somebody has, let's say, been raiding consistently. They are doing things to make their character more powerful. And that doesn't mean it should only be in this one corner of the game. We want to expand that to other parts of the game. So that player's played a lot. I think we should reward him. He shouldn't have to, go back and spend a lot of time just to get his feet wet in PvP, or even buy crafted gear that's far inferior to the other stuff that he's wearing. So I think that's the main thing. If you're a raider or an LFR guy and you have got a lot of gear, I don't think you should have to reset your whole gearing system just to step into PvP. And PvPers, they might not understand that because it's very kind of, it's kind of a high-level thing, but we're trying to get them more opponents. That's what I'm trying to give them. And that's what we're trying to give them, more opponents. Like, that's what would be great for them.
Absolutely.
What about the usefulness of PvE gear in PvP? We talked about that, but what about the opposite? So what about PvP gear in PvE? 'Cause what its current item level, it's like 6 levels below even Raid Finder, right? So it seems like less viable than it was earlier in Mists. Is that something that was done intentionally?
Kind of the expansion and the eye levels have kind of gone. Where early on, I think like Conquest Gear was like 483, and I think LFR was 476. Right, so it was a little
first,
better.
And then 480.
So I think you saw what happened when we did that. We basically came into 5.2, and there's also the other issue of, you know, if someone can go and spend all their time doing Battlegrounds and completely bypass the catch-up system we have for LFR, we don't think that's great either. And so what we had to do is we had to change the Conquest and Malevolent Gear from 483 to 476 when the game, when 5.2 got released. We didn't want to do that again. So that's why the Conquest Gear is 496 now, so that when we move into 5.4, it doesn't change at all. So that's kind of the issue there.
Philosophically, we would love it if, like, players in Epic Conquest Gear felt like that was enough to get them into raiding with their friends. You know, obviously they're going to want to get upgrades to get better, but in the same way, if you have really good raiding gear, that should get you in the door of PvP. Really good Conquest Gear should get you in the door of PvE, and then you want to upgrade from there.
Right.
That's the goal.
Let's talk a little bit about the new heroic scenarios that you guys are doing in 5.3. So, I mean, it seems like a lot of players are kind of thinking that heroic scenarios are designed to substitute for more dungeons. Is that correct?
No, the heroic scenarios were always something you could do when you're not running instance content. The original scenarios were designed for something you could do when you weren't running instanced content. The problem was gear has increased so much since we did those original scenarios that now, even for moderately geared players, they feel a little silly. Like, you go in there and just blow everything up, and there's no challenge at all, and you're not using any of your abilities. And we said, why don't we offer a way for players to play that gives them a little more challenge in return for a little more efficiency? So the Valor's a little better, the item level you can get at the bag to the end is a little higher, but you have to go in with your friends. You have to do a pre-made group. We're not going to rely on matchmaking to find you a group of 3 competent players. So this is one of those cases where we've got plenty of matchmaking in the game for things like Raid Finder and the older scenarios, but if you want to try a heroic scenario, you really need to find a couple buddies to do it with.
Yeah, it seems useful. So are we safe to assume that heroic 5-man dungeons are not going to disappear in future patches?
Somehow we sent out a bad message there. I love heroic 5-player dungeons. I mean, that's what got me in the game to begin with. We are all huge fans. What we were working against this time was we really wanted Throat of Thunder to be a crazy epic raid. We wanted to send a strong message to players that big raids are awesome. When we tried to do multiple dungeons for Dragon Soul, we ended up with a raid that was a little smaller than I think we and ultimately players wanted. So we just are going to have to figure out a way where we can deliver both 5-player dungeons and raids in the same patch to make everyone happy, and we're just not quite there yet.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Something else that a lot of people have been discussing lately is 10 versus 25-man raiding, and whether it was the right call to equalize the raid sizes. So where do you see that going in future patches?
I mean, we're not going to make any radical changes at this point to the way that works. Basically, the problem in Mists was, for the first tier of content, the 10-player was probably a little easier than the 25-player, but that matched the audiences who were looking for that difficulty level. I've said a couple times lately, there are very few 25-player normal raiding guilds out there. You have to be super dedicated to do that, because most of those 25-player guilds are really planning on being heroic guilds as soon as they can clear the normal content. That's not the same for 10s. There are heroic 10-player guilds. There are also plenty of normal 10-player guilds out there. And what that means for our balancing is that if 10 and 25 are truly equal in difficulty, that the 25 players are going to have more success and the 10 players are going to struggle a little bit. And that's what we saw in Throne of Thunder, where we thought that we nailed the difficulty a lot better than we did in the first tier, and the 25 players said, yeah, this feels pretty good, and a lot of the 10 players are like, this is really hard compared to the last tier. So we've made some adjustments, and we will try to look at that going into the 5.4 raid of making sure that 10-player guilds don't just get stuck on a tough boss that's like the second or third one in the system. As opposed, we're not going to overhaul what 10 or 25 mean at this point. It's certainly something we'll reconsider for future expansions and see how we're feeling at the moment.
Something else we saw this morning, following another interview this morning. Is there really no Valor gear in 5.4?
I flubbed that answer a little bit.
Okay. I'm glad we asked it then, so we can clarify.
How Insider, whoever it was. We like the Valor upgrade ethereal dudes, and so far we sent them away on the new even patches for 5.2, and we're asking ourselves, how can we keep them around for 5.4? Because it's a great system for progressing your character. But there's this weird analysis paralysis if you can use your Valor to buy a better item, or you can use your Valor to upgrade the current item. So what we're talking about doing for 5.4 is Valor is for upgrading the items, but there will be other sources of gear for players, even players who don't like raiding. There will be, and we're not ready to talk about those features yet because 5.3 hasn't even gone out yet, but we will have gear progression systems for players in 5.4 that are not tied to raiding and not necessarily tied to Valor, since they can get Valor, they can use the Valor to upgrade whatever their best gear is.
Tell me a little bit about, let's talk about the new Battlefield Baron story quest coming in 5.3. Tell me a little bit about this. I mean, it seems like it's quite a new style of max level questing for World of Warcraft, more dynamic than dailies. Is this something you guys are, is this something we can expect in future patches, something you're testing out?
It's, like you said, it's a test. We'll see what the player reaction is. We're tentatively excited about it. We think it's a good direction to go. As you guys know, in Myst, we tried to provide a lot of outdoor content for players to do when they weren't doing dungeons or battlegrounds or raiding or those things. And most of that took the form of daily quests. And we heard pretty quickly, boy, there's a lot of daily quests in this game. So we didn't want to give up on the idea of outdoor content, because ultimately we think that contributes a lot to making World of Warcraft feel like a world and not one of those games that's totally centered around queuing up for instances, which, they're fine games. They're just not the experience we're going for. So the idea with the Barons is it's outdoor content. You can do it alone, or you can get together with a group of players, and it's much less structured. There aren't going to be quest givers a little bang over their head telling you what to do. You can kind of go out and do what you want, and if you want to spend 10 minutes doing it, that's cool. If you want to spend a Sunday doing it, that's cool too, and kind of progress at your own pace, get some rewards again to get Valor, get charms, improve your gear, and get ready for running dungeons or raids or whatever content you're interested in doing. Have some tentative plans to do similar things in patch 5.4. Again, kind of depending on how players react to 5.3, but excited about it. We'll see how it goes.
All right, I want to get back and talk about some PvP. Put Holinka back on the chopping block. But first, I want to tell you guys about a great deal we got going on with Squarespace. If you guys have not checked out Squarespace, go to squarespace.com right now. You're going to get 10% off. Use offer code GameBreaker5. This is good for new accounts and first purchases. If you guys have not checked out Squarespace, it is awesome to build a website. We are building a brand new website out for Gamebreaker Nation. Oh, look, there it is. And we are utilizing Squarespace. It is great. The functionality that they have built into the new engine is just phenomenal. And you can get yourself up and running with a website, blog, whatever you need, super, super quick. And it looks gorgeous. Their themes and their templates they're award-winning. They're amazing. They're really, really good. We got this up and running, I think, in about an hour. So this was about an hour of work, some icons, some logos, some images. Go check it out today. Go over to squarespace.com. Use offer code GameBreaker5 when you sign up, and you're going to get 10% off. Check it out. All right, Brian. Let's talk about some PvP. How do you feel the balance has been in 5.2? Everybody wants to talk about balance. Let's talk about 5.2 balance.
It's very interesting to me that all these things we try to do to improve, like the high level goals and the structure and the systems of the game. But I would the overwhelming majority of like Twitter messages you get are about class balance by far. People are very invested in their characters, so it's very important to them. I think there were some situations where we were trying to make some talents more interesting from 5.1 to 5.2. A great example would be hosted redirect versatility. Like there was a rogue ability called versatility, and it was not really seeing much play. So we created a new one called Marked for Death. And in other situations, like for instance, we had burst of speed, shadow step, and preparation. For rogues, preparation was another ability that we actually thought all rogues could benefit from having. So there we had to create a new one, cloak and dagger. So we were doing a lot of talent work, and in some places we just overshot a bit. We felt like it made some classes a little bit too good, and the talents were just a little bit too good. So we tried to rein those in. And we base our balance feedback on a lot of factors. We look at representations, the distribution of ratings across all specs and classes, how people are faring, like within our team, how they're playing. We talk to some of the very high-level players on a very constant basis. We try and get a sense of where the problems lie, and then we try and fix things that we feel like are, are big problems for the overall gameplay of the game, where it just makes everybody's life a little bit less fun. And we try and attack those. There's situations where maybe you could say this or that has made this class even more competitive, but there's also situations where this talent is just one-shotting people, and so we have to look at that, and we have to understand that it's made the game less fun to play. Our goals are basically try to make specs and class competitive, try and make the overall gameplay environment fun. And then we want to say, try and make some talents interesting, and try and make rotations interesting and fun to play. Sometimes, we make changes that are a little bit out of priority there, but that's generally what we try to do. And I think going in from 5.2 to 5.3, that was a lot of our goal, was to kind of rein in some of the things that got out of control.
So what are some specifics? What's on your watch list right now for 5.3?
It sucks because we don't want to just keep nerfing, right? Like we want to spend a lot more time buffing than nerfing because it feels a lot better. But it's funny that you almost always are seeing calls for nerfs from players, like nerf that other guy, nerf that other guy, nerf that other guy. So we watching it, we see that shamans are performing, resto shamans are performing very well. Rogues and hunters are performing very well. Mages are performing very well. So and shadow priests were performing very well, and so we made changes to a number of those classes to try and rein them in. There are some classes that are underperforming, and we'd like to see improve. I don't think we recently made a change for paladins to allow divine protection to be used while stunned, because we think it solves a problem that they have against a lot of caster teams, locking them down and blowing them up. So there are certain buffs that we try to make for classes we feel are struggling against other certain classes. But what we also what's very complicated about balance is that oftentimes you nerf a class by nerfing their partner. So there are certain comps that are very good, but it's because these other classes are very good. So it would be interesting to see. Priests were performing very well because they had a great synergy with rogues and hunters. And shaman oftentimes perform very well because they perform very well with shadow priest. So we made changes to those classes, and we have to see what exactly happens in 5.3.
And I mean, it must be incredibly difficult for you guys to firstly to isolate exactly what's going wrong, but also do you really try to make? You were saying a second ago that you try to pull classes that are underperforming up. Are you realistically aiming to have every class and spec viable? And I mean, obviously, viable is a very subjective term, but because that doesn't seem possible to me.
It's a noble goal. The first thing we worry about is does a class have something that they can compete, some way that they can compete? Then we try and say, do they have a role where they can compete? And then we worry about specs. That's kind of our priority order. It's tough to make, for instance, some of the pure DPS classes. How do you make every single spec of mage equally viable? It's very hard. It's very complicated. We try. If we see areas, we can. It's also very easy, as you could see, to go too far. So, but one thing that Greg, has touched on with me a lot is that oftentimes we'll make, players call for make a little change, don't make these big sweeping changes. But often we make little changes, and they don't do enough.
Yeah.
They don't, push people over the edge. So we make a big change, and then it's like, whoa, stop with the big changes. you know, it's a tough balance. You know, we do try, and there's just so many aspects of the game, right? I mean, you know, we could make a change of PvP. It hurts PvE. We make a change for rated battlegrounds. It hurts arenas. There are specs that are amazing, and I mean, you know, Death Knights are a great example of where, you know, players play Frost in rated battlegrounds, but they play Unholy in arenas. You know, like, it just, there's a lot going on there, and so I mean, which spec is too good, Frost or Unholy, because they both have their niche. So you know, like I said, the priority we talked about before is kind of how we approach things.
Hey, we're gamers. It's in our DNA. We just
it's never going to stop.
It's never ever. You know? It won't.
You know, we know that you know, if and Greg touched on this in another place, in another interview we recently had, where, like, you know, there's this thought that if we make all the spells different for PvP and PvE, that, like, we will meet this, you know, blissful state of complete balance.
It's the silver bullet that fixes everything.
Yeah, and
separate PvE and PvP completely. Do it.
Yeah, we've made a lot of games, and in no situation, there's not a single game out there where all players, the forums are empty, the game sold 15 million copies, and everybody's like, "You guys, great job." You know,
it's such a thing. It's all good.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the role check system for Battlegrounds. So that's in place for 5.3. This seems like this is going to be an awesome, great change for players. I mean, provide more balanced teams, things like that. But some players are concerned that it may possibly increase queue times, and that may lead to people, you know, playing the system like they do in LFR. Is that a legitimate concern for players?
I think it's a messaging problem more than anything. We kind of taught players through LFD and LFR that some roles are a little bit more scarce than others, like healers and DPS and tanks, like healers and tanks. So healers and tanks get quicker queues. But that's not really how this system works. The system's goal is to try and get an equal number of healers on both teams. It's not trying to create any fixed composition. We're not trying to say that Battlegrounds won't start unless they have 3 healers. We basically... every time a battleground is being populated with players, we say, how many healers are online queuing for battlegrounds right now? And we try to match that ratio approximately and try and get the differential between the two sides to be 1. So one side might have 3 healers, the other side might have 2. It's better than one side having 4 and the other side having 1. You know, we're not looking for perfection here. We're looking to make the game better. It's something players have asked for. So it should not affect queue times. Software is tough. We're going to watch it. We have a lot of good metrics to see if it's working appropriately, see if it affects queue times. I would be, you know, I would be kind of naive to say that I don't think maybe they could go up by 5 seconds or 15 seconds. You know, it could happen. It's doing more work now than it was doing before. But hopefully, you know, you're waiting. If you wait an extra 30 seconds, but the 15 minutes you're in the battleground is a better experience, that's a worthy cost. But the goal was not to increase queue times.
Absolutely, and I think it's definitely sort of a risk-reward thing. Like, the risk of having a completely unbalanced battleground versus a slightly longer wait is kind of a reasonable change. Greg, you've spoken about this in your PvP blog a while back. Are there any future plans still in play for more matchmaking in random battlegrounds?
Yes, is the short answer. When, I don't know, Brian could probably talk a little bit more about the more recent direction we've been trying to go with some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think, like, the main thing people had asked for was like gear level matchmaking, and it's a noble cause, right? Like, put me with other players that have similar skills, but I think there's 2 kind of problems with it. 1, it'll affect queue times, and 2, do you really know it's working? You know, like, do you really know that, like, you're gonna get killed and you're gonna say the system's not working because that guy killed me? You know.
If the system was working, I would win every match.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I think we also made this change where we just put base resilience on with everyone. So we kind of feel like we did do some work to help improve that already, and we're going to maintain it again or watch it again. I almost feel like if it was more deliberate, that This is the pool for the newer folks. This is the pool for the more hardcore folks. And you elected into it, you would know what you're getting into, and you would know that, like, this is for new people and this is for, you know, highly geared people, rather than it just being. I mean, I know you all trust us. I know you all think the game is working perfectly all the time, as you should. But you know, we want players to have good feedback that things are working the way they want.
Let's talk about the new battle. You got a new battleground and the new arena going in 5.3, but you're also you're making changes to the existing maps, to some existing maps. What was your thinking behind those changes, and are you guys planning to do more of that?
Yes, I think the main change. Developments can be so long. I forget what's in, you know, 5.2 and 5.3. But one of the big changes was Eye of the Storm. There was, you know, they had very high platforms, and you would run off them. And basically, if you did everything perfect, the reward was you don't die, and that kind of that's silly, right? So we lowered those platforms considerably. So now you just run off them, and it's fairly easy. And that's just kind of a quality of life change that we made. I think there are future ones like we'd really like to add. Like Warsong Gulch really has a problem with graveyard camping that we'd like to fix, and we kind of are trying something in Deepwind Gorge where we have a graveyard on each side, and depending on where you die, you spawn on the other side. So, like, you know, the other team would have to split to make sure that you got graveyard camp. Something maybe we could do in Warsong Gulch. It kind of can work well in Twin Peaks already. So we think that might be something we want to do. You know, you guys have talked about it. We've talked about making some of those more epic battlegrounds, redoing them. So all on the table, all things we're looking at. Got to create new stuff. Got to change old stuff. Prove the things that are in there. So
yeah, absolutely.
What about a while back? There was some talk about bringing some changes to CC and instant casts in a future expansion. Is that something that's still on the table?
Yeah, definitely. We started going down that route and decided this is going to be too big a change. We really need to make sure. We like, in our minds, the best kind of CC has a cast time, which means you have to stop moving. Someone has a chance to interrupt it. There's a risk of school lockout. And the worst kind of CC is the, like, no cooldown, long stun, and I kill you while you're stunned. Stuns are something we really want to take a hard look at. They have so much power in that they interrupt, they let you take damage without breaking the CC. We really want to kind of look at those universally. We're worried about the fear metagame where players feel like, wow, fear is really underpowered or it's really overpowered, and it has a whole lot to do with is there Resto Shaman on the other team or not. So fear is something else we want to look at. We're considering trying to offer some more DR options to some of the specs that are really locked into, like, nope, everything is a stun or everything is a fear. You don't have other options there. I think overall, there's probably a little. I think players probably spend a little bit too much time crowd controlled overall. That's something we want to creep away from. We don't want a game that's just about tunneling each other and blowing each other up. We think the crowd control offers some of the best, the tactical, smart, coordinated use with your teammates that ends up being really fun. We just want to make sure that you don't spend too much time not in control of your character either.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely the case. It sounds like good changes. And are you looking to do similar things with the stuff that came in earlier in the 5.2 PTR, I think, with the instant cast heals and blanket silencers changes coming in? Is that still on the table? Yeah,
that's even harder to solve because there are so many instant heals in PvE, and PvE, does pretty well by having them. So taking out a lot of that is a lot bigger balance and has a lot of risk of players feeling like, oh, PvP nerfed my raiding experience, thanks Blizzard. So we have to be very gentle with things like that. But overall, there is we can't nerf silences too much or instant heals will dominate. And there's an arms race there that we just kind of have to get a little better control of.
Greg Street, Brian Holinka, thanks so much for coming on the show. Hey, do you know these two cats, Zarheim and Bashiak?
Are they flaming in the chat there?
I don't know. I'm not really sure about these guys. You guys better keep your eye on these two because I'm really not too sure about them yet. Keep an eye on them. They are shady dudes. Greg Street, lead systems designer over at Blizzard Entertainment, World of Warcraft, and Brian Holinka, senior PvP designer. Pleasure having you guys on the show. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on and answering our questions. You can watch Legendary every single Thursday, our World of Warcraft show right here on GameBreaker.tv every Thursday at 8 PST, so definitely tune in for that. And with that, we'll see you next time.